My name is Jackie Boland. I'm the Community Outreach Director for AARP Hawaii, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here today on the first day of July. Woo, woo, woo. On behalf of AARP Hawaii, Uala Leaf Cafe at Windward Community College, and Kaunoa Senior Services on Maui, we're just really happy that you're able to join us. And in fact, some of you have been joining us for over a year and a half, and we really appreciate your continued interest and support. Before we go any further, I wanted to just launch a quick poll because I'm curious to know if there is anybody on this webinar who is here for the very first time. So if this is your first time, if you could click on yes on the poll, and if this is not your first time, you can click on no. Oh, it looks like we have one person. Okay, one person. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. Now, for you, the one person who is here first time on the show, if you put your name in the chat and send me your email, I will send you a nice surprise. So thank you for coming forward and letting us know that it's your very first time. If you want to get rid of the poll that's still on your screen, folks, just click the X in the upper right-hand corner of the poll and it will disappear. So since we only have one new person, I may not need to say this, but AARP is a nonprofit, nonpartisan membership organization with 140,000 members here in the state of Hawaii. And what we do for everybody. The purpose of this program is to really help people add to their toolbox in terms of healthy cooking and a healthy lifestyle. For those of you who are new, or the one person who's new, you can just know that if you need to submit a question, you can do that through the Q&A. We won't be using the raise hand or the chat unless you want to give a message to everybody on the call or make a comment to one of the panelists, or if you're having technical problems. Your best view, if you're on a PC, is going to be your side-by-side speaker view. And you can get that by clicking in the upper right-hand corner of your screen under View. If you're on an iPhone, that's not going to work for you. So sorry about that. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Chef Daniel Swift, who's going to be teaching us how to make some ribs with a healthier dry rub. So Chef Dan, just go ahead and take that away. And happy July. Dan, are you on mute?
Sorry. Oh, Jackie, and thank you everyone for joining us, especially the one new person. It's nice to know that we have a lot of regulars coming back. Actually, we just finished the annual reporter I did for fiscal year here, and it was over 7,700 participants we've had in the last year plus offering these courses. So we're super thankful and very grateful for everyone who takes time out of their Thursdays, what used to be Friday night, to join us for a quick class on some healthy approaches to baking or cooking. Tonight is ribs, and we're doing this, obviously, we're coming up on 4th of July weekend. So we wanted to do something that might be reflective of what folks might be doing on Sunday this weekend or into Monday, if you're taking Monday off. So there's a couple just sort of keys which we've covered in previous classes. In a way, it's really good that we get to come back to ribs, and ties in a little bit to like marinades and spices and the herb usage that we used before in previous classes, and definitely cooking methods. So let me just point out a little overview of what we'll be doing, and then we can get started. We it's 45 minutes on the high end or on the long end. So it's quite a bit to get done. The ribs and stuff have been pre-cooked, but I'll still walk you through the whole process so that you can see how it works and what you're looking for sort of towards the end. So here I have the rib, which I'll talk to you about it when we start to prepare it. But what I've written here, like keys to rib cook or good, nice ribs, temperature is essential. So what we're trying to do is break down the collagen and make the meat that is really tough to begin with nice and tender, and not lose all of the moisture that's in it as well. So what you want is a really low temperature. And the ideal temperature, if you're doing them in the oven, is about 225. And this may vary. To be honest, ribs and barbecue is like religion for a lot of people. So we're just brushing over some of the fundamentals that can guarantee you to have a good, tender, flavorful rib. But once you get into smoking and some of the other techniques that can take overnight and long, long periods of time with real wood fires, it's a lot different. So a foolproof temperature for you to work with what we're doing tonight is 225. You want it nice and low. We want to go low and slow. That's the key to keep the flavor, keep the moisture, and make it tender. You'd never want to take a rack of ribs, season it, and throw it on the grill with a high temperature, dry heat. It's just tough and almost impossible to eat. The other thing that we wanted to cover tonight is rubs. There's literally a million different variations on the rub. There's some standard ratios. I kind of outlined one here. The primary ingredient, and this is the ratio here, it's an 8:3:1:1. And I wrote down below it, hopefully you guys can see that. It's 8 parts sugar, and generally it's always primarily sugar on the top end. The next ingredient would be salt, and then generally chili powder. Not always, it just depends on your preference and what region of the United States you're in. And then the last one is other spices. So those ratios just means like 8 parts, of course, sugar, 3 parts salt, 1 part chili powder, and then 1 part other spices, and you mix it together. We'll go through the ingredients that I have here, and then we're not using sugar. There's a lot of substitutes out there. As a matter of fact, the last couple of weeks we did baking and utilized a couple different sugar substitutes. Tonight I'm just using Truvia, which is about half the quantity. Actually, I went a little bit less. So if you're trying to stay off the sugar, this is a ratio for the sugar-based one. So I would recommend that you read the conversions on the back of the substitute that you purchase, and then just make that adjustment accordingly. You can also scale back on the salt. As a matter of fact, there's some rubs that have been used in our kitchen before that don't have any salt, well, or very, very little salt and almost no sugar. So it can just be dry spices. It's up to you. This is just a traditional ratio, and we'll take a look at the ones that we have mixed in here. So I've already sort of got it scaled out. I don't know if you can still read the 8, 3, 1, and 1, but we'll go through those as we blend it. So I've got the sugar substitute. I've got the salt, which I scaled back slightly. I ended up with a large batch, so it's not going to go onto the entire rib. You're going to have some rub left over depending on the quantity that you make. The chili powder I have here, and then in this mix of other spices, which is 1 part, I added some cayenne pepper, ground white pepper. I'm looking for a little bit of heat here. Paprika, some smoked paprika, a little bit of sea salt, and we have a blend of like taco seasonings that we do with some native Hawaiian herbs. And I put a little bit of that in there with some dried mustard and a little bit of sage. So you have to just kind of select the things that work for you, what it is that you like. And you can also buy even pre-mixed seasonings. I brought this one out just because this is a poultry seasoning mix. And you could use something like this or one of your other favorite seasoning or herb blends to take the place of blending your own rather than having to buy all of the different ones. It's a little bit more, a little quicker and a little more economical. And then the other thing that I have here, which you can buy, and many of you may use this already, is a liquid smoke. So if you're not doing a smoker and you really love that smoky flavor that you'd get from barbecue, you're doing it in the oven like we're doing it. You can also add a few drops of liquid smoke. And alcohol extract smoke. So a couple drops of this goes a long way. It's in a sauce, it's in the doing it, or even blended in with the rub will work, and it'll transfer that smoky flavor onto your finished product. So that's a really good product to keep around. A little bit goes a long way though, remember that. And then I'm just gonna mix these here. And if there's any front end questions, feel free to ask them, Jackie, if you're doing those questions tonight. It's very simple. I just put all of these ingredients in the bowl and I mix them together.
Sure. Shar is asking, she usually boils her pork ribs before she marinates and bakes them in the oven. Does this make any difference on how quickly it cooks or how tender it will be?
Yeah, that's a great question. Shar, so for what I recommend, and it's not that I haven't boiled ribs before or meats, but just keep in mind that what you're going to be doing in part is pulling flavor out of the rib. Any meat that you're cooking or boiling, it's like making a stock, so you'll be extracting some of the flavor. It's not necessary with this technique. As long as we go low and slow, you'll be fine. So I know a lot of traditional dishes call for boiling meat. A lot of cultures have dishes that require that or have you do that. I honestly always recommend that you never boil meat because it makes it dry. And once the dryness comes out, it may be tender, but you'll never get that moisture back into it. So maybe a good example is maybe you've had a soup, chicken soup, where you've got chicken, it's in a broth, but you eat the chicken meat itself and it's dry, it's hard to swallow. And you wonder how that could be possible because you're actually eating it in a liquid, but it's that high temperature that extracts all that moisture. So you want to be careful. It would not be necessary with this technique.
Thank you. And then Dora is wondering, at what point do you add the liquid smoke?
Yeah, I'll show you that. I could actually add it here, Dora, and rub it in. If I had a larger bowl, just get in there with my hand. And it would disperse throughout the granules of salt and sugar and spice, and that would work. Or I could put it in with the foil when I roll up the rib, and I'll show you that. I'll just throw some in to show you that technique. Thanks. So this is mixed nice. And honestly, what I'll tend to taste it before you actually put it on your rib and utilize it, and then find that, oh, it didn't have the flavor I wanted, didn't have enough of this, had a little too much of that. Now's your chance to make adjustments to the flavor of the rub. Another great thing, and I had some left over from the ribs I did earlier, makes a great gift. So you can put it in a little jar, put it in a container, put a lid on it, tie a ribbon around it. It's great for the holidays, great for summer. They'll hold up. It not a potentially hazardous product. So this can last a long time on the shelf. The only thing we need to keep in mind in Hawaii is the humidity. So anything with sugar is going to absorb moisture. So that you can drop there if you want to last period of time, but gifts and super simple. All right, great question. So the rib we're using today, I just got the baby back and I picked this up at Safeway. You can get ribs. I got them last week because I was assuming the price would go up. So we're using the one that's at the top. It's a little bit meatier than your St. Louis ribs, which are from the middle of the rib, and then a spare rib, which would be off the lower end. So different people have different ideas about, which is more flavorful. If you want more meat, you probably want to go with the one at the top, the one we're using tonight. If you want more fat, then you'd go to the lower end in the spare rib. And then if you've tuned into classes previously, especially with Chef Dale Thomas, it comes in a cryovac bag. So when you're buying these ribs, and I bought these frozen, thawed them out, laid them in the cooler and let them dry overnight just to get a little bit of skin on them. And it'll be vacuum packed like this, sealed in a bag. So you just want to open that up, drain off any blood. You can rinse it if you want to, dry it with a towel, and then just go to town with your rub and start your process.
So Clayton is asking if you can cook the ribs with the rub in an Instant Pot and have good results.
I knew that question was going to come. Thank you. Was that Nathan?
I have an opinion on that one. But.
Yeah, I thought Jackie would ask that question. You can. The setting that I would use there is a simmer. You want to try to keep that temperature as close to like 200 as possible. So low and slow is the key. Now you can go quicker, and you just sacrifice a little bit of flavor, but I would recommend that you try to shoot for the I think they have the simmer setting and sometimes the low and slow setting. You do that, and that would be your best result. But yes, absolutely, you can use an Instapot or a crock pot. Would work fine as well. And
The
I'm
only
just,
problem with that is that nothing you cook in your Instant Pot has a crispy outer side to it. So you
yeah,
kind of have to put it in the oven afterward and make it crunchier if you want that. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And that's what we'll do with these tonight after they come out to get that crispy outside. Or you could throw them on the barbecue grill as well. It's up to you. Because what we're doing now initially is making sure that we're locking in some flavor and making it tender. Once it's tender, then we can throw it in. The ones I'll show you later, I put in a 495-degree oven with some basted barbecue sauce on it for about 4 minutes just to crisp it up. And then it was ready to serve. So a couple different techniques that you can use, and we'll go through those. So I just cut these in half because the oven is small. And now I just need to put them in a bowl and get some rub on them. I'm using a glove just so because I don't have a sink out here handy. And then these are fine. This rub is the way I want it. I'm just going to sprinkle some on and then make sure it's nice and coated on both sides.
And Dora and Linda have the same question, which is they're saying that sometimes ribs have a membrane, and do you need to remove it?
Some people will remove the membrane. That's the connective tissue, and that's a great question. I'm glad you both asked that. What we're trying to do here with the low and slow technique is to break down that connective tissue. So the collagen will break down in the cooking process if it's low and slow, maintain, like I said, the moisture and the flavor. There is elastin and other connective tissues like silver skin, we call it, that won't break down with moist heat. So remember, these are all the things that kind of hold muscle to bone. And there is a trace amounts of silver skin that won't break down, but more often than not, most people won't take the time to remove that. You won't really notice it when you're eating it. There's not a whole lot there. But with like other cuts of meat, tenderloin, rump roast and things like that that you trim up, you would remove that silver skin because it won't break down. And also because those steaks are usually cooked on dry heat methods on a grill where it's really hot and there's no moisture. So great question. Now, normally, of course, we would have this sit for at least an hour, up to overnight, even longer. I've purchased some of the ones in the store that are already have the dry rub on them, and who knows, they could have been dry rub a month ago. It's not going to hurt it to have it on a little bit longer, but you do want to try to leave it on for at least an hour. And what I would recommend is overnight if you can. So you could prepare it like this, just set it in the fridge overnight, and the next day it goes into the oven ready to go. So what I want to do is create a seal. So I've doubled up my foil just to make sure I don't get a puka in it, and we end up with the juices running out. So I'm just kind of folding this up together. Hopefully you can see that nice. And then just gently, I'm not folding it really, really tight. I just need a seal. So I'm folding it down a couple times, and that overlapping will cause it to seal. And then I just need to do sort of the same on the end. Just a couple folds or a roll even. And we'll have it sealed in. So what we'll have here is the juices that come out of the meat will form moisture in the bottom of the pan or in the bottom of the foil packet. That'll cause the steam, and that will create the moist heat cooking method that we're looking for to cook the rib nice and slow. Now there are a couple techniques. I'm going to just put this in the oven now and let it go 2.5 hours for a full rack like this. Depending on the size of your oven, if you're going with like more than 4, you might go up to like 3 hours. What you can do, of course, is in the process is always gently unroll it. And that's another reason you don't roll it super tight, because you can then open it up and take a look at your ribs. And if you grab one of the ribs and just give it a little tug and see if it turns and comes loose from the connective tissue, then you'll know it's done. You can also poke it with a fork. You can also often I do. There's a
So
limit to
Dan,
the.
I apologize. Your audio is cutting in
and-
and out a little bit. Could you repeat what you just said?
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. You want me to check the audio real quick?
If it's not too much trouble, you've had about 4 incidents where your audio slows down.
Okay. Yeah, I see it says the internet is slowing down on me. Is that any better?
Sounds good so far, but it's been a little intermittent.
What I was pointing out here is that to determine how long you need to cook it, like I said, 2.5 hours is my recommendation if you're doing one at 225. If you're loading your oven with more than that, you want to go a little bit longer, probably 3 hours. And you can unwrap your rib so that you can, because we didn't roll it really tight, so that you can access it to test whether or not it's tender and where you want it to be. So that can be done by grabbing a bone and just twisting it a little bit to see if it will come loose from the meat. You can poke it with a fork or your piece off and taste it and see if that works. And then if it's not done, you can just roll it back up and put it back in the oven. One other thing that people will do, and I'll do that here as we mentioned, some people put a little bit of liquid or broth in there. I have a bowl. This is all of the liquid that came off of the earlier ribs that I cooked. This could be boiled down into a barbecue sauce, but I could also spoon a little bit inside to give me just a little bit extra moisture. I don't need a lot because you get a lot from it. Is the audio working better now?
I've switched computers to test it out, so
Okay.
keep going.
So I'm going to just put in a couple spoons of this just to give it that little extra moisture. Some folks will put like white wine or garlic or create a little bit of a marinade of sorts. That's perfectly fine as well. It's up to you. Or you could do nothing. And then I'm going to just add a couple drops of that liquid smoke I mentioned earlier.
Sorry, folks. I think we definitely are having some technical difficulties tonight, so I apologize for that.
Sorry about that. I switched computers because the old one was fading and I'm not sure what's up with this one. So I'm going to just roll this back up. And then I'm going to go straight into the oven here.
And while you're doing that, Clayton's wondering, can you cook it in and I'm sure I'm going to say this wrong, is sous vide, then broil or torch a finish? Or
yeah, you said that pretty close. Sous vide. Yes, you can. And that, Clinton, I think you said a great question. And there's any number of ways that you can get the meat to the tender stage that we're looking for. So keep in mind that we're taking this tough cut of meat and we're trying to make it tender. So any of our combination cooking methods that we covered in previous classes, or you can look them up, combination methods, or any of your moist heat methods. I've even steamed ribs before. I would steam them before I would boil them because it leaves the it leaves the flavor in the rib. But that moisture and that steam tenderizes them. And then I cool them down, season them, and throw them on the grill. So yes, absolutely, sous vide works to do the tenderizing. And then you could take them out, cool them, and then you can throw them on the grill. You have to be careful because they can tend to fall apart. They'll be really tender, but they'll be delicious.
And Lori's wondering, could you use parchment instead of foil?
I have not used parchment before, but if you have a quality parchment paper, it should work fine. Yeah, but you're probably going to want to double it up. And keep in mind that it's a low temperature, so it's not going to get too crispy and crumble apart. But yeah, I think parchment would work. And also remember, we're going at a real low temperature, so most of your food films will go up to temperatures of about 350 degrees. So, parchment paper wrapped in plastic wrap and another sheet of parchment paper or a plastic film would work as well. We do that in the kitchen all the time.
And then just I noticed from the chat, Shirley had asked, rather than wrapping in foil, can you just put the ribs in a pan and seal the pan tightly with foil?
Absolutely, great question. I was going to show this. You can absolutely put your ribs in a pan and just seal it tightly. What we're looking for is to make sure we lock in the moisture. As long as the moisture is locked in, it could be in a, like my grandmother used to use the pot roast pot for chicken, for ribs, for beef, all kinds of things. As long as it's sealed, then you're good to go. And then I'm looking here, Jackie, at, you know, like I mentioned before, I kind of grabbed one of the rib bones, and it's not super hot because remember our just pull the bones.
Wow, your audio
It's
is
nice
really breaking up, Dan.
and the meat will come off. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, there's not. Yeah, I'm.
That's okay. We may
made the
not have,
adjustments.
we may not be able to fix it tonight. We'll just plug through. But yeah, so sorry, folks, if if you can't hear. We have a new system going on.
Sorry about that. So what you can do now, once you have the rib out, this can be cooled. It can be eaten right away, of course, no problem. It can be cooled and refrigerated and then thrown on a grill at another time. It could be microwave. You can do whatever you want with it. It's now flavorful and tender and ready to serve. I wanted to show, you know, we have a light barbecue sauce. A lot of people prefer to have a glaze on them and then have it caramelized. You can come back with a glaze and just brush them. And then this would go into the hot oven or onto the grill. This is where we would get that crisp outer skin that we come to like. And that would be simple there. And I have a couple here that are done. I'm just going to plate this as is. Serving for one here. And do be careful when you're handling this because they can tend to fall apart. Right? And then again, this is the juice, Jackie, that we could use to reduce and make a barbecue sauce.
So just a question, Cindy pointed out that the recipe that you sent them has sliced onions, a cup of water, and a lidded pot. So
Yep.
Is the foil technique is coming out with the same results as using that lidded pot?
Exactly. Yeah, I don't have a pot that would fit in here in the small oven. If I were in the kitchen, I would use a lidded pot. I could have used that aluminum pan and just covered it with foil. But as long as we're trapping the moisture in there, that would be great. On the ones that I put out here, I did have some onions in there. I had some crushed garlic as well. Totally up to you what you want to put in there. The rub is sort of our focus tonight on what kind of things we would want to put in there. And then making sure that we're using moist heat with the low and slow temperature. So yeah, absolutely. Anything that you would like to do and use as substitutions in there would work great. Pork always goes great with slaw. I have some roasted vegetables here. Fruit works great with pork. So I have some compote that I created with pineapple, some fresh fruit as well. To round off the meal, rather than potatoes, I just made some of our multigrain rice that I'll serve with some purple basil. That works really, really well. The flavors go really well together. Thank you to Jackie Malley for that. I roasted some squash. So we'd have some roasted squash, and then I saw some fried plantains the other day, and I haven't had them in a long time, so I picked those up. I thought that might round off a barbecue, a 4th of July style barbecue really well. So I brought those out there also. So yeah, my apologies for the sound. I'm not really sure what happened. We'll definitely get that squared away for next week. But if you have other questions, I'm happy to answer them.
I have a couple. Actually, I have one from me that I just wanted to ask. So we focused on the rub because rubs are healthier than sort of a brown sugar barbecue glaze.
Yeah.
But I admit that I kind of like that stickiness. So is there something that's healthy that you can use to create that? Like, will a fruit juice do it, or do you really have to have a sugar in there to create that, sticky rib kind of thing?
Well, you'll get fructose from the fruit and fruit juices. If you go with the natural sugars like that, a little bit of honey will go a long way. A touch of molasses would go a long way. Remember, we're getting in the rub that I made without sugar, the glaze that I could create with the drippings would not have sugar in it. It's the sugar substitute. And then they also make low sugar barbecue sauces, keto style or carb free or low carb barbecue sauces. You could utilize those as well. So there's a number of approaches.
The drippings have fat, a lot of fat in them. Isn't the drippings actually just the fat from the meat, or is it more than that?
It's more than that. Yeah, definitely more than that. So probably in this case, I would say it's probably maybe 25% fat and the rest is liquid. Let me see here.
You just made me so happy with that information, Dan.
Yeah, so this is the drippings from the other one. And you can see that little layer of fat on top. The rest is all moisture and meat juices. Now this one earlier, I put in a splash of white wine. It had that garlic I talked about, onions and things like that. So whatever you put in the foil or in the pot with the lid creates the juice, but you will have a little bit of fat. You could skim that off, but you want to make a barbecue sauce out of this, usually through reduction, but you have to be careful because it depends on how much of your rub comes off. If you've got a lot of spices or salt or what, it can get too strong really quickly. So you can just tighten it up with a little bit of cornstarch and then use it as a glaze. And then
oh my gosh, okay.
Hot oven.
That was worth the price of admission right there, Dan.
Right there, yeah.
So I have 4 more questions for you here.
Sure.
Janet is wondering, when you're baking up your ribs in the oven, is it necessary to put them on a wire rack? Is it helpful? Is it not helpful? Can you speak to that?
It does not have to be on a wire rack, as opposed to a sheet pan, I'm guessing. As long as it's surrounded by heat, that's fine. If you're doing it straight on the rack, I would recommend the pot method, like in the recipe. You don't want to tear the foil on sliding it in on a rack and then all those juices run out into your oven. That would create a mess. But yeah, absolutely.
Francis just wants to know when she can come over to taste.
Right now, come on over.
Dora is wondering how you cook the plantains.
These I picked up, they were already done. They were already fried. It was a chip, plantain chip. I don't know the brand, but you don't see them or I don't see them that often. And I hadn't had them in a long time. And I was thinking the earthy flavor, the starchiness with this meal would be perfect. So I grabbed, it was in a little container. I haven't seen fresh plantains in the store for a while, so they were already made. But if you were making your own, just thinly slice them. Sometimes they're twice fried, but we're trying to do healthy. So well, we do limited amounts of that.
It's so hard. Okay, so Danny is saying, asking, some recipes start with a very high temperature for about 10 minutes first and then turn the heat down to very low. With this technique, does it matter if this is done first to crisp the ribs?
Yeah, Danny, I always do the crisping at the end. If you think through that process, and you're doing high in the beginning to get, caramelization is what they're talking about probably, and the Maillard reaction, and then they lower the temperature. With this rib, it wouldn't really work because we're trying to seal in that moisture and make it tender. I tend to, even with my turkey or chicken, things like that, I always do the browning on the back end. So I make sure that the product is cooked nice and slow. It's juicy, it retains all its flavor and that natural juice. And then I get the browning at the end just to where I need it, and then I'm done. And then you serve it. So if you're doing it on the front end and then trying to tenderize, it makes it kind of hard. But, that's more of a scientific approach, at least from my perspective. You have more control at the end to caramelize your ribs. So like you can see here, maybe this one, the barbecue sauce got all gooey and bubbly and caramelized and sticky. Oop, and a piece fell off. I would eat it.
Okay, we have we have so many people that want to come over for the barbecue. And they're all vaccinated, so it might be possible. Larry Nagayama, while I'm looking at your name, I want you to know that you won the door prize. So if you send me your email in the chat, if you haven't done that already, then you would be able to get some of Dan's fabulous spices. But getting back to the questions, well, first of all, Lori is saying she would refrigerate the drippings and then the next day skim off the fat that's been hardened, and then that would make it a much healthier stock to use to make whatever the topping is. Yeah,
absolutely, absolutely.
Great tip.
And if you are watching, apologize if you can't hear me. I'm just talking to myself. If you are watching your fat, they make a gravy pitcher. You may have seen it. If you haven't, they're super handy. And what it is basically like a measuring cup. And the spigot for the liquid comes out of the bottom of the container. So it's a vessel like this with a handle, and then the spigot comes out of the bottom, almost like one you use for watering plants. And then what that allows you to do is take a gravy like this, or drippings, and all the fat's on the top. And as you pour it, it only pours from the bottom and the fat stays in. So that's a really handle. They're only a few dollars at most of your kitchen supply stores, but those work really well. But the chilling technique is probably the #1 technique to use for sure.
That is a great tip as well. And can you just confirm, is it Truvia that you're using as the sugar substitute?
Yeah, what I'm using, I don't try not to promote brands, but for this rub, we used Truvia.
Is Truvia a brand or is it a thing? What is it? What is Truvia? I thought it was a thing.
I think of it as a brand, but it might be a thing. Cane sugar blend, stevia sweetener blended with cane sugar.
Okay.
So it must be a brand. And I know it got its start with the little coffee packets and things. As a matter of fact, if you're looking for substitutes, go online. I did see some that you can order that are like not very, very low carb, brown sugar substitutes used specifically for barbecue sauces and things like that. So, and rubs. I didn't have time to order one. I just looked it up the other day. But there's just so many products out there now that we didn't have access to before. You could use applesauce as well. There's different fruit, like Jackie mentioned, fructose, a healthier sugar, and you can get sweetness from fruits.
So we just have a couple more questions. One was, can you just say where you got the plantains?
Yeah, I got these at Safeway.
Yep. Okay, and then let's see. Cindy is saying, or no, Lori is saying, could you use sweetened monk fruit as a sweetener?
Absolutely. Yeah, I used that last week, and I'm using it pretty regularly. I have like 4 different kinds. I didn't want to bring them all out again this week just because we had enough stuff going on. But yeah, absolutely. Any of those, anything to give you that sweetness will work perfectly. And then even on the sodium side, we don't use a lot of the salt substitute, but they do make it. And if you really need to lower your sodium, you can lower the quantity in the formula or in the recipe, of course, but you can also use a substitute for salt in some of that. But I think it has MSG. So just read the label, be careful. and educate yourself as you move into these new products that are coming out of the labs.
Yeah, and then we did have a question about last week's door prizes, by the way. We just replenished the door prizes. So if you were a confirmed winner last week, then you'll probably get those in the next day or so. Remember, when David, our faithful volunteer, contacts you in the chat, you have to confirm that you want to receive the prize in order to get that. So if you get contacted by David DeWitt, you do need to respond. So I think we're done with all of our questions that don't have to do with when we're all gathering to eat the ribs. So I just want to say thanks, Dan, and thanks for pushing through those audio challenges. And folks,
Absolutely.
we did have a new computer tonight, so we'll do some testing before next week. So hopefully you'll give us another try next week, where we will be, oops, I'm on the wrong computer. We're going to be talking about summer salads next week, I believe, making a salmon and a tofu salad. Is that correct?
Yep. Yeah. Watercress and tofu and tomato. Yeah. Couple of classic Hawaiian style salads. So thank you for joining. Sorry for the mishap on the audio, and happy 4th of July, everyone. Be safe.